Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge. We are presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live, and I'm excited about this show. This is the reaction show the day after. I can't believe college football is here. What an exciting day of incredible upsets. We'll get into all the local teams. I will talk about Columbus State soccer and the Atlanta Braves. But I want to remind everybody that you can listen to the show on WQEE 99.1 FM, the key out of Noonan, Georgia. And this is going to be just an absolutely incredible show. You know, the calendar rolls around to September and we got a little bit of fall weather and it was great. After the Columbus State soccer game, because I called it on the Peach Belt Network, I went home, I watched college football. I saw all the local teams in action. I will give my breakdown on the local teams and my impression. And I'm going to give you the best college football show that I can give you. And look, I really love college football, even though I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area and I love the NFL. But it's really just an incredible atmosphere. Saturdays meant for college football in the South. We love college football so much. We're going to go ahead and start this show with Colorado TCU. This might be the game of the year. And I actually posted that on social media. You know, some people are saying like Lee Corso, not so fast. The impact that Deion Sanders is making at Colorado, I'm stunned. I did not expect this at all. I thought that maybe it was going to take a rebuild because he came in as the head football coach at Colorado and cleaned house and brought some of his guys from Jackson State, including his son, Shedeur Sanders. I'll get to him because he had a Heisman moment yesterday. And Travis Hunter, the two-way player, the number one recruit out of Collins Hill in Georgia, he had an incredible game. A 20-point underdog, the Colorado Buffaloes pull off the upset over the TCU Horned Frogs. And remember, TCU was in the national championship game last season against Georgia. This was a back and forth game. I watched it on Fox. It was on the big noon kickoff. By the way, Gus Johnson is my favorite play-by-play announcer, hands down. His excitement level really left that game to a lot of eyeballs on TV, had a huge rating, I believe. I can't wait to see what the ratings are for that because people want to see Deion, whether you like him, whether you don't like him. What is there not to like? He is genuine and he backs it up. He talked about establishing a culture at Colorado. They're moving to the Big 12 next year. Huge upset win, 37-34 over TCU. And I think they just keep on rolling. I mean, they're going to be underdogs in some games, but I think this Colorado team is for real. And I want to talk about his son because Shedeur Sanders broke a school record for 510 yards passing. He had 4 touchdowns. He looked poised. A lot of people thought that Colorado's line play was not going to be a factor, that it might suffer, that Colorado does have some skill players, but the O-line helped Shedeur Sanders have time to throw in the pocket. He would roll out to the right or the left and make plays. There were Colorado receivers wide open. You got to give credit to Deion and Coach Prime's coaching staff for generating play calls to a team going up against a team that went to the national championship last year. I mean, I cannot stress that enough. And going into a hostile environment in Fort Worth, Texas, and Colorado gets the big win. This was a statement win, and it really put everybody in the college football world on notice. And I want to say, this is a shameful plug. I want to give a shout out to all those people in the media that really believed in Deion and his vision. And you know, if you're like a Georgia Tech fan, I know that there was wishful thinking that Deion would go to Georgia Tech when he was at Jackson State and he did what he did and established a culture and got the number one recruit in the country to go to Jackson State. I was a believer in Dion, and you have players that now transfer. I mean, you got the former Alabama running back Trey Sanders now on TCU. You have former FBS players that are now playing at the FCS level because of NIL money. I mean, that's really the landscape of college football. And I think that the Colorado Buffaloes are going to compete. It's going to be a little tough because I think the Pac-12, I'll get into some of these teams in the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 is loaded this year, but a great win for the Colorado Buffaloes. Speaking of the Pac-12, want to talk about Michael Penix Jr. He is really going to be a Heisman contender, and what he did against Boise State. That was another game I watched. It was the later game after I watched TCU and Colorado. I watched a little bit of Washington and Boise State, and Michael Penix Jr. looked poised. He looks like that he is here for the party. Caleb Williams did his thing. I mean, you have some Heisman contenders in the Pac-12, but what about Oregon? I know it's Portland State. Oregon put up 81 points on Portland State. Not too bad after their opening loss last year to Georgia. And Bo Nix has included himself in the Heisman race as well. And I think the Pac-12, they want to go out with a bang. I think the Pac-12 is going to have a statement in their last season. Majority of the teams last seasons, as everybody is leaving the conference next year, you got Oregon State and Washington State that are left out on an island. Hopefully a conference comes in and swoops them up. I know that there's talks about the Mountain West, but it's going to be a fun college football season. I hope to have some guests on in the next couple of weeks. Don't forget that Thrift Behringer and I will have our Georgia-Alabama Sports Live scoreboard show. As I'm doing more stuff with Georgia-Alabama Sports Live, this podcast is presented by Georgia-Alabama Sports Live. And I also share a lot of the stuff and put it on the radio station as well, because I do have a radio show 5 days a week on WQEE from 2 to 3. I'm on after Rod Peterson, right before Braves Country Today with Mac McGee and the Armchair Quarterback. Also, if you can't watch the show on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, or you're having trouble finding the station because of the online, or you're just not in the Noonan area, you can always listen to the replay of the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It's just a great way to subscribe to the show, download the show, and just listen to it in your car. You know, I do a show an hour a day, 5 days a week. And so there's good content, and I try to do my best to give you the best content that you deserve. What's different about this show is I try to keep it local to Columbus. So when I'm talking about college football, I try to give a shout out to the local players in the Chattahoochee Valley, like the former Troup County Tiger, Jamari Thrash, who scored a big touchdown on Friday night when Louisville played Georgia Tech. I'm going to keep an eye on Penn football. I know they don't start until September 8th because they're running back Malachi Hosley, the former Northside Patriot running back. I had the privilege of calling one of his games. And as I get more involved in high school football, I'm going on my third year covering high school football in the Chattahoochee Valley. There will be some players that I remember covering that will be playing at the next level. And I want to give them some love on the show and try to give them shout outs as well. Let's go into the local teams, the three teams that we cover here in Columbus. I'm going to start with Auburn. Auburn played first. They played at 3:30. They're taking on UMass at Jordan-Hare Stadium. The Hugh Freese era begins in Auburn. A big shout out to Thrift Behringer and Rick Beach. Rick Beach from Kutsu Sports, Thrift Behringer from Sports Visions and Georgia-Alabama Sports Live. They were at the game, and I cannot wait to get their insight on what it felt like, that electric atmosphere, and just the fans, the waving the towels, and the Eagle swooping down to the 50-yard line. College football is back. The tailgating, the college football traditions, and Peyton Thorne, good quarterback. He can throw the football. I liked how Auburn used Robbie Ashford down in the red zone. In fact, they had a cool nickname for him on the broadcast, Red Zone Robbie. I love it. And Auburn, no problem against UMass 59-14. I know that the offense struggled last year under Brian Harsin. If you're an Auburn fan, you got to be happy what Hugh Freese is bringing to the table. And Auburn, I believe, going to beat Cal next week. They're going to beat Samford. They're going to be 3-0 going into that Texas A&M game. And I'm really excited to see Auburn take it on Texas A&M. And I still think this is a 7-8 win team. But Auburn is going to win some games they're not supposed to win. And they might impress some people, and they might have a more surprising record, maybe 8-9 wins. And I think this team is only going to continue getting better under Hugh Freese. Now, if you're a Georgia fan, look, I follow a lot of Georgia fans on social media. They panicked after that first half. I'll be honest with you. Going up 17-0 on an FCS school in UT Martin, yeah, they panicked. Look, it's going to take time for Carson Beck to know Mike Bobo's system. You have a new offensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs. But Carson Beck is going to be fine. He had some good plays, extending drives. I thought that utilizing Brock Bowers when necessary, I mean, he's a freak. He is the best player in college football, in my opinion. And Georgia was able to come out on top eventually because of their depth. Yes, it is UT Martin. UT Martin played a very good defensive game in that first half. And I thought that Georgia held its own as they defeat UT Martin 48-7. Now let's talk about Alabama. Alabama was playing on the SEC Network last night. This is another game that I watched. Not necessarily from start to finish. I just wanted to see a first couple of drives for the Alabama Crimson Tide to see how they would respond. And I'm impressed. I'm impressed with Jalen Milroe. He becomes the first Alabama player to pass for 3 touchdowns and rush for 2. What Jalen Milroe is doing is good enough to win games. I want to see his arm. I want to see if the run game is not there, if he's facing an elite defense, can he win games with his arm? Isaiah Bond really stepped up because I thought that the 2 receivers that Alabama had that were going to step up was Ja'Cory Brooks and Burton. But Isaiah Bond, good wide receiver. You have Jace McClellan. Alabama is absolutely loaded. And Nick Saban is here to stay. This is one of the favorites to win the national championship. I would not be surprised if they do win the national championship, but Jalen Milroe has got to develop more of a passing game because they could get into situations where they're facing an elite defense. I cannot wait till next week when they play Texas. That is going to be the game that I've penciled on the calendar that I'm going to sit down and I'm going to watch from start to finish, possibly on my phone as I put the kids to bed. But still, that's the great thing about the technology we have is that I could put the AirPods in my ears and watch college football on my phone. I didn't even turn on the TV yesterday. I watched all the college football games on my phone, and, my phone's charging in the background anyway. So Alabama, great win, 56-14 over MTSU, and a pretty good start for the 3 teams in the Chattahoochee Valley that we cover. Don't forget that you can catch Thrift Behringer and DJ Jones on Sports Visions, Smooth R&B 92.1, Mondays and Thursdays from 4 to 6 as they have players, former players, beat writers that break down all the local teams here in the Chattahoochee Valley. It's a lot of fun. We do have some other college football games I want to get into. We did have some big upsets. Fresno State upset Purdue. I thought that was a huge upset. And then you have Texas State beating Baylor. This is the biggest win for Texas State since they won that game back in the early 90s when they were known as the Texas State Armadillos. Nah, just kidding. Big shout out to the movie Necessary Roughness. When I first heard of Texas State, that's what came to mind. Those green uniforms, Scott Bakula as their quarterback. Classic, funny movie. Kathy Ireland as a kicker. Yeah, I had to give some love to the Texas State Armadillos. But the Texas State Bobcats get a win over an FBS school in the Baylor Bears. let's talk about Ohio State, because Kyle McCord is now their quarterback. He is taking the place of CJ Stroud. They still have the two best wide receivers in all of college football, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith. Now he's on the Seahawks. What am I talking about? They Emeko Menuhu is the other. I hope I get his name right. Correct me in the comments if I got his name wrong. Travion Henderson, a pretty good running back. Look, they struggled against Indiana. I'm not going to lie to you. Their defense might be elite, but they defeated Indiana 23-3. And did it feel weird hearing Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson call a Big Ten game? I was watching that game and it was like, it's on CBS. And it's like, it felt weird. And so next week, the CBS game is going to be UNLV in Michigan. I mean, that's just going to feel weird because I'm used to hearing them and watching them call the 3:30 game for the SEC, which we will have in a couple of weeks, South Carolina and Georgia. I'm excited about that game too. So Ohio State, they struggled a little bit. They'll be fine. I don't think they're going to fall in the rankings. Ohio State does this from time to time. They'll have the first game jitters where they're slow out the gate, but I still think they have an elite defense, and that offense will figure some things out. You got a new quarterback. Kyle McCord is going to have to learn the system, but with Ohio State quarterbacks, it seems like they plug and play just about everybody, whether it's Cardale Jones, JT Barrett, Braxton Miller. The list goes on and on, all the Ohio State quarterbacks that have been in the system. You remember Joe Burrow was in the system for Ohio State, and then he transferred to LSU. I want to give some local love to the Georgia teams, whether you're FCS or FBS or NAIA. You had Point University that went down to Valdosta State. They ended up losing. They are 0-2 on the season. Georgia Southern, they beat the Citadel 34-0. Congratulations to the Georgia Southern Eagles. I do have some colleagues that work with the broadcast for Georgia Southern. Want to give a shout out to Georgia Southern down in Statesboro. I know they love their Georgia Southern Eagles. And Paulson Stadium, I've got to get to a game. That is just an incredible atmosphere down there. If I'm down there in Statesboro, I've got to make sure that I get to a game. And then you have the Mercer Bears, who got a big win against North Alabama last week in the FCS kickoff. They went to Oxford to take on Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss Rebels, and they lost 73-7. But Mercer's going to be fine. They'll be back at Five Star Stadium, and they'll have a jam-packed house in Macon. I've reached out to some colleagues in Macon. I would love to do a crossover show where we talk about some of the Macon athletics, including Mercer football. It is great. I know they do a great job covering Mercer football down there. And then Troy got a big win over Stephen F. Austin, 48-30. A big shout out to Jonathan Shushke, a.k.a. Buckets. He plays golf at Stephen F. Austin. I know that he's a huge fan of the Lumberjacks, and giving him some love here on the show, talking about Stephen F. Austin. And he's even been on ESPN+. How cool is that? That Buckets has been on ESPN+ calling games, does a great job and a huge talent. And we miss you in Columbus, but we know that you'll be back during the summertime. And I know you're representing down there in Stephen F. Austin. So that was a great. I just wanted to mention that game. We do have a doubleheader today for college football. Oregon State and their new starting quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei, going to Spartan Stadium to take on the San Jose State Spartans. I don't expect a whole lot of fans there because, like I said before, nobody cares about college football in Northern California. And that will be my hot sports take. And then probably the game of the week. I know I already said that, Colorado TCU is the game of the year. This could be the game of the week, is LSU and Florida State. The quarterback battle, Jalen Daniels for LSU, Jordan Travis for Florida State. Florida State was one of the hottest teams ending the college football season. They ended LSU's college football playoff hopes in the beginning of the season, defeating them on a crazy play. Second-year coach Brian Kelly for LSU is out for revenge. It's the Camping World Kickoff Classic in Orlando, and it is going to be absolutely bonkers tonight between Florida State and LSU. All right, a couple of side notes, and then I will get into my Week 2 preview. I called Columbus State soccer. They were playing a top 10 team. A big shout out to Coach Jay Entlick for having that interview after the game. You could hear that interview here on WQEE later this week. The Columbus State soccer team, fresh off their Final Four appearance last year, they fell to Embry-Riddle 2-0 at the Walden Soccer Complex. I called the game along with a baseball player from CSU, Andrew Rubin. We called it for the Peach Belt Network. It was a lot of fun being back in the broadcast booth up at the Walden Soccer Complex and calling Columbus State soccer. And their next home game is going to be Wednesday, September the 20th against Clayton State University. You catch that game on the Peach Belt Network. Big shout out to the Atlanta Braves. They play the Dodgers again today, going for the 4-game sweep. They defeated the Dodgers 4-2 in extra innings. They pick up their 90th win. They are now 7 ahead of the Dodgers for the best record in the National League for home field advantage. And Ronald Acuna Jr. hits his 31st home run. Bryce Elder ends up pitching a gem, and the Braves can really put the Dodgers out of their misery today, going for the 4-game sweep. I love the Braves during this time as they make a huge postseason run. I don't want us college football fans to forget about the Braves. I know Justin Dale doesn't forget about the Braves during this time. Tyler Redmond, he is all over the Braves during this time. By the way, a big shout out to WRBL's Tyler Redmond. You can catch his podcast, Braves on Deck with Tyler Redmond. You can catch it on YouTube. If you love the Braves, he has got all the insight on covering the Braves. And also, I want to give a special plug to a local guy here in Columbus, actually from Harris County, who is becoming a national superstar. I'm talking about Josh Pate. You can catch his Late Kick podcast on Sunday nights, Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, starting at 8. I cannot wait to hear his show tonight because he breaks down college football like nobody else. And I just admire his work ethic and what he has done as a broadcaster. And so I just want to say a big shout out to Josh Pate and Pate State and everything about the Late Kick podcast, which is absolutely incredible. And I cannot wait to see where he is going to go for his Once Upon a Saturday tour. More than likely, I'm going to take a guess and say Tuscaloosa because you have Texas and Alabama coming next week, possibly. All right. Well, that's all the time I have here on the show. This has been my reaction show. Got up Sunday morning before church, and I decided to do a reaction show to college football. I plan on doing this every week. I'll have a high school football reaction show Saturday morning. I'll have a college football reaction show Sunday morning. And then when the NFL gets here, I'll just include that in Monday's show. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy your Sunday. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. And we'll talk to you next time.